So welcome everyone. I know there are a few people who are joining a little bit late. Vic's cat is not behaving as well as yours, Sahela. He's just going to stop it eating something it shouldn't.
You have a captive audience here.
Yes.
Your cat is so beautiful. I have never seen such a beautiful cat before.
Thank you.
Definitely attentive. So I'm going to hand over to Joan, who's going to lead the conversation this evening, and really would love you all to remember to use the chat, make comments, raise questions. Joan will introduce who we have with us here today, and yeah, I look forward to this conversation. Joan, over to you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Tamsin. And maybe I'll just start by saying, and thank all of you for joining us, but especially our panelists. But I think I want to just question the word lead to start with. I hope to be the person who, in a marathon is running along, giving water, helping people move down their path and their journey and their race, personal and part of the community, rather than someone leading or directing or redirecting the group. But I live very near, just above the football stadium, bet you didn't expect that, of the University of California, Berkeley. And that's where they hold the big graduation for all of the students each year. Saturday was graduation day, and I left my house early for an appointment. And, there they were. The roads were blocked. They were setting up. There were the lay stands. There were the people starting to walk in. And I found myself getting very emotional. Just the emotion. And I asked myself, I was surprised. Who are these people? Well, I knew the majority were women graduating, that the largest ethnic group was Asian, that the median family income was $80,000 a year, that 27% of them received federal Pell Grants, which are for families that earn less than $40,000, and that often Berkeley is considered the best public university in the country. And that told me nothing. It was a snapshot. And snapshots are often misleading because they don't capture the spirit, they don't capture the dreams of what is really going on in all these people who were moving in to the stadium. And then I realized something that was very shocking to me, my self-image, and that most of what I knew about these people, other than their demographics, which I could look up on the web, I had learned from other people. I had heard people talk about, maybe friends, professors, neighbors, so forth. But that my own opportunity hasn't always been this way, but my own opportunity to listen to them talk about their lives and their world was all filtered by others. And I realized that that very few of my friends, my colleagues, my group really had the opportunity to learn from them what their world was. And that's what today is really about. It's about our learning and our insight. So I have 3 jobs for the group today, not our panel, but the others. And these really came from conversations with the panelists. So they aren't my ideas, and I invite them to interrupt me at any point, correct me, redirect me as I talk about issues that are particularly important. But your job, now I'm talking to the audience here, your job is to listen without filters, without seeking confirmation of what you already think, which is likely based at best on what you've on incomplete information, what you've heard from others. So ask questions at the end and during the discussion, but come with a true, deep, open listening mode, which means checking our own biases and experiences along the way. Anyone like to add to that? Okay, job 2. And again, this isn't exactly how previous conversations went, but it was my takeaway from those conversations. And who are these people? And I, we were wrestling with that. We are all adults on this call. And dropping the word youth switched my mind significantly and changed the otherness of their message, of a reality that was here and a perspective that was outside of that. So these adults are part of the diversity portfolio that will create the future. Just as we got all these different perspectives, experiences, factions, geographic locations, these adults who have come and agreed to be part of a panel today are part of that portfolio and not sort of a separateness on the youth. And finally, on your job 3 is as you listen deeply to these adults and ask your questions and engage, listen to their stories. And so why did Tamsin choose the word story? Why are we using the word story? There are a lot of words people use to describe experience or knowledge or insight. And it's because stories are bridges between people. They stimulate the imagination of possibilities. Now, what do we do when we tell a story to a kid at night? I mean, maybe I only do that because I'm a grandma. But you make up a story and can feel the kid, going to a different place and seeing the world differently, and then drifting off into that world. So stories are bridges. They stimulate the imagination of possibilities of what could be. They bring facts and experiences and our belief systems, our dreams together. They're stepping stones to the future. And stories are how our mind works, the habits of our minds. So that's why we frame this as stories today. So now the audience has those 3 things to do, plus to engage, ask questions, and help us go deep into the issues. So first, I have asked them to briefly introduce themselves. And, there's always that dance between what's directive and what's useful. And I never hit it right. But, hopefully they may decide to tell you how they became guardians of the future and their affiliation outside of Guardians or what's important to them. It's very open, but I've asked each of them to just briefly first talk about that introduction, and then later we'll talk more about their belief systems. Is there someone who would like to start that? Or do you want me to be the teacher who calls on people?
No, thanks.
I can kick it off.
Thank you.
So my name is Vic Barrett. I'm 25 years old. I've been a climate justice activist since I was 14 years old. I mostly try to work on storytelling and the intersection of other social justice issues with climate change. Try to talk about building empathy. I'm a plaintiff on a lawsuit against the US federal government, suing them for the direct action that they've taken to perpetuate the global climate crisis. That lawsuit is known as Juliana versus United States. If you want to check it out or research it. I've been a part of Earth Guardians for almost 10 years now. A lot of the reason that I'm connected with Earth Guardians has a lot to do with relationships and family, and being close to people I care about, which I think are like the fundamental tenets of what we have to do in order to care about the climate. So yeah, that's me. I know I'm going to talk a lot more about myself and what I do as we continue to go on. So I'll leave it there and pass it on to one of my fellow panelists.
Thank you. That was beautiful.
That's great. Would you like me to go next, or Rena? I saw you about to.
Oh, yeah, no worries. I mean, you can go first.
Great, thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, my name is Emmy Scott.
Oh, I think Emmy's,
Oh, she froze.
yeah. Rena, why don't you go ahead? I think Emmy was having Wi-Fi issue. Oh, there, Emmy, you're back.
Great. It's funny because when I freeze, I can still hear all of you, which is an interesting little metaverse thing happening. Yes, hopefully I do not freeze again. If I do, I'll turn my camera off and hopefully that will solve the problem. But yes, Emmy Scott, pronoun she, they. I'm the executive director of Earth Guardians at the age of 24. And I am also a graduate of the University of Northern Colorado, go Bears, where I achieved 2 degrees in environmental studies and business management. As a person that lives with bipolar syndrome type 2, I work at the intersections of breaking stigmas of mental health, as well as bridging equity for people of historically marginalized voices. So women, BIPOC, and those with visible and invisible disabilities. So that's a little bit about me. And like I said, it's very exciting to be sharing this space with you all and being able to have a collaborative conversation versus just being on a stage and talking at people. So really excited to be able to share with all of you. And yeah, I'll pass it on.
Thanks, Emmy.
Thanks, Emmy. I think I'm gonna go next. Hi, my name is Rena Kawasaki. I'm 18. I'm a freshman at Yale University. I'm actually sitting in one of our very beautiful libraries right now. I'm still on campus for a musical that I'm working on, which is really exciting. I think my main, I started my activism when I was, oh, sorry, let me put on my mic a little bit louder. There's construction going on, so hopefully you guys can't hear that. But yeah, I started working on my activism when I was 8, when I first realized the amount of privilege that I had as a relatively wealthy student in Japan, where I grew up until the age of 18, and then I came here for undergrad. And my main motivations came from my fellow Japanese students saying, oh, the Japanese government isn't going to change anyway, or Japanese society isn't going to change anyway. So in Japanese, that's like, there's a word for that called dose, and my dose means kind of like anyway. And I really want to kind of abolish that word when during my time here on this earth. And I work with governments and corporations and I try to create a new kind of bridge, or kind of a collaboration between youth and governments, which are not just like anti-government, anti-corporation, or anti-institution, but rather working together in order to create bridges to create solutions that are even more long-lasting. So I've been I'm CFO, which is not chief financial officer, but chief future officer for a biotech company here in Japan at the age of 15 called Uglena, where I supervised human resources policies and also different policies regarding sustainability. And I've been part of Earth Guardians since the age of 15, so around 3 or 4 years now. And I have my own chapter in Japan where we are working currently with local and national governments to incorporate youth voice into our regional governmental system. So that's kind of, yeah, I'll pass it on to Mensa.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Joan. Thank you, Rena. My name is Mensa Kwami Tsedze. I'm Togolese. I'm 33 years old. I'm a biologist with a major on ecology and ecosystem management. I start working with ecological movement since 2010, and I work with a lot of youth movement before joining at Guardian, and I have a great love for globality. So I also work with some research institutes across Europe on globality. And yeah, I have served from 2017 to 2019 as global youth representative to UN on rural economy. So I joined at Guardian since 2013, but the reason why I stay at a Guardian is that across all my experience, at Guardian is the place where I have the possibility to act on the field. So during on my engagement in youth social movement, especially for ecology, we spend a lot of time on demanding, protesting. But with El Guardian in Africa, I have the opportunity to work directly with young people, take them to action. We have created many crews. We are present now in 35 countries in Africa. So I love the work I'm doing with El Guardian. That's why I'm here. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you very much for that. And maybe we should take just a moment now. And is there someone who would like to explain more for our audience about the Earth Guardians? We maybe should have just so they, is that a question that's out there? What is Earth Guardian?
I
Would someone like?
love to.
Go ahead.
I'm like, whether it's out there or not, I would love to share about Earth Guardians.
It is
Yeah,
out there. I saw some waving hands.
Incredible. Yeah, thank you for allowing us to bring that into this space. Earth Guardians is a 501c3, an international nonprofit that trains and empowers youth, diverse youth, to be leaders at the intersections of the climate crisis. And so essentially, yes, and feel free to ask any questions as I go. But yes, Earth Guardians, we really walk our talk with having a team of
The suspense.
Froze again, if you can hear us.
Somebody's trying to quiet Emmy.
Bill, that's
Rena or Vic, do you want to carry on?
Yeah, sure, I can do that. Although I've not been in this organization as long as Vic. Yes, so Earth Guardians kind of operates in a kind of like system where we have members from over 60 countries that are conducting their own kind of grassroots work in our different respectable countries. For example, for me, I started off as a crew leader in Japan, and then now I'm on the regional directors board. So we kind of, fund, create a community of, and support our youth who are usually up until the age of like 25, who are working to better their communities in their respective countries. So that's kind of my take on it. But Vic, if you want to add anything else, I know you're part of this organization.
Yeah, I would just add, like, Earth Guardians has existed since 1992, and was built off of like just wanting to bring young people together to talk about the climate crisis and also to talk about community and family. And those are kind of the core values for a lot of the work we do and what we try to promote. And yeah, I think you hit it on you hit the nail on the head, Rena. Otherwise, yeah.
Thank you.
Are there any questions from the audience about the organization
I would just like to add something briefly, if that's okay. You hopped off, or you were knocked off, and Rena and Vic filled in. And I will say that, like Rena said, we have global crews or chapters of young people all over the world doing grassroots-led projects, from civic engagement to mass tree plantings to environmental education, artivism, fossil fuel resistance. Our youth are doing lots of different things to protect the environment locally, which really ends up affecting the global climate movement. And we provide our young people with educational resources, financial resources, a network, campaigns to join. So we are like a resource center for our young activists. And essentially we're an on-ramp for youth to get engaged in climate and environmental and social justice organizing. And these young people, as you will see today, then become leaders in their communities and global leaders within the environmental movement. Like Vic introduced himself, he's suing the United States government. Rena was the Children's Peace Prize winner. Mensa is constantly working with leading scientists around soil regeneration and mass tree plantings, and Emmy is an executive director at a young age. So we are an on-ramp for youth leadership in the global movement. And the founders,
I was just going to suggest, Kelly, that you introduce yourself.
Sorry about that. Yeah, my name is Kelly Burns. I go by she, her pronouns. I live on occupied Eastern Band Cherokee territory in occupied Asheville, North Carolina. And I'm the international program director at Earth Guardians. I've been with the organization going on 8 years now. And I do a lot of our grant writing, fundraising, partner relations, and then I oversee all of our programs as a mentor for the young leaders who are actually the individual program directors. So that's my job, and I'm kind of like the organizational mom in some ways, which I really love.
Okay, Jim asked who were the founders, and then Emmy responded in the chat that it was a family that lived in Hawaii and Boulder, and there's a link there. But would someone like to just share with the group who were the founders of the Guardians?
Yeah, the founders of Earth Guardians were the Roski Martinez family. Tamara Roski founded the organization with her father, actually, Makasha, in 1992 as a environmental high school, an accredited high school on Maui. And music was a big part of the mission, music and theater and arts, to get the message across and for young people to be able to really relate to environmental activism through the arts. At some point, the Dalai Lama gave the organization the Torch of Hope. The young people went on tour with this torch to 28 states, as well as to the UN, to talk about climate change. And this was in the late 90s, before it was a popular issue. Eventually, the organization moved to Colorado, where it then became a 501c3, and then it became global. Young people started to catch wind of what Earth Guardians in Boulder was doing, specifically Tamara's oldest son, Scott Martinez, who is a global speaker, as well as hip hop artist and environmental activist. And young people were wondering how they were making such a difference in their community, getting bans on moratoriums on fracking, bans on pesticides in parks. And that's how our cruise program started. And that's how we became a global organization. That's a quick snapshot.
Okay. Would anyone like to add anything to that?
No, I have nothing to necessarily add. I just want to thank my team for being able to fill in for me. It's quite incredible to be able to have an organization that is working at so many different intersections. What we do is complex, but also quite simple. And to be able to have a team be able to just say exactly what I was thinking is just quite beautiful. That what we're really building is agency, community, and direct nonviolent action.
Oh, well, thank you. So maybe that's a perfect introduction to to each of you having the opportunity to talk a little bit longer about little bit more in more depth about your work, your aspirations, and to give all of us sort of a greater background into what you would like to see happen and in timeframes. And again, I don't want to restrict that, but it should be, you know, each of you, I don't know, Emmy, you're on a roll. Would you like to start?
I actually wouldn't like to start. Is that okay?
That's perfectly fair. See, that's why I generally don't ask people. So I will sit here. Who would like to start?
I can say I can kick it off. Yeah, so the basis of the question is like what we would like to see, what is kind of our ethos or the way that we go about these conversations, is what I understand. So I will say that you know, I've been doing this work for a very long time, and I've gone to the COP conferences, the UN, spoken at the UN, been in governmental spaces. And since I was very young, at a very young age, basically trying to work within institutions. The reason I got involved in the lawsuit was because I was too young to vote. But I was realizing that legislators looked at young people who had a lot of information and a lot of facts and kind of patronized us. You know, pat you on the head, take a photo, send you away, even though you're begging for your future, basically, with all the info and facts to let them know that your future is at risk. So that's part of why I joined the lawsuit. And it's brought me to a lot of interesting spaces, whether it's very institutional or whether it's like a yurt in New Mexico. And so that has a lot of that's I've had a very like varied experience in terms of how you approach this issue. And what it's led me to at this point has been kind of the understanding that climate change is a symptom of a lot of bigger illnesses that we have in the world, whether that's capitalism, patriarchy, racism, all of those things. And at the end of the day, we could spend all day on this call trying to break down each of those issues, but really the biggest illness is the lack of empathy that we have for each other, and the lack of love that we're willing to provide for people that we don't even know. As we know, the climate crisis impacts people all over the world, people that we'll never meet, but we still have to have a lot of love in our hearts for them. And if we practice that, we're doing the best that we can. And I always say, like, I don't expect everyone to sue the government. I don't even expect everyone to join an organization or to go speak at the UN or to do any of that. As long as you're thinking about your neighbor, thinking about the people you love, that's like not a radical thing to do, but a very special thing to do. And I try to encourage that consistently. So if you're helping your neighbor bring their groceries in, you know, you don't have to consider yourself a climate activist. Just carry love in your heart for the people around you, and that's going to be what's impactful at the end of the day. So that's kind of my approach to activism, and my thoughts after learning a lot and being in this world for a long time. I think we forget like the base of what we're actually talking about, which is just trying to protect one another. So yeah. Did that answer the question?
Very much so. And would it be fair to say then that what you hope people take away from today is a greater consciousness of like, okay, I won't, then I don't need to stumble over summarizing it. I mean, that was very beautifully spoken. So thank you. Okay, who would like to follow on?
Joan, could I speak up for just a moment? My name is Jeff Holland. I worked for Joan for 7 years at Stanford Mab. and I'm privileged now to do a column for Planetary Press called The Earth System View. And I'd very much like to interview whoever is the most appropriate person from Earth Guardians as part of our continuing series. So, I mean, I'm hoping after this process that Joan will help me direct me to the right person to get Earth Guardians involved in what we're doing.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. We have that out there and may come back, but I want to continue our sort of roundtable with the people who are sharing with us now. So, who would like to follow Vic in this deeper dive into Guardians, your relationship with it, the Earth, and the future?
I can go next. I think there was a question in the chat as well, and I'll try to answer that.
Okay.
But I think that Vic, I think our three like panelists have like a good dynamic because we have like a good understanding of different parts of activism culture. I think Vic is I was like grounded in, you know, that sort of caring for that neighbor that and then I feel like I'm sort of in like the middle because Mensa also does a lot of like more specific work in his community, and I believe that he'll do better explaining about that. But yes, I usually am working with governments in the private sector, which is, I think, a pretty unusual thing for a youth activist today. I don't know if it's a public image, but I feel like when you think about activists, it's usually kind of going against private sectors and government and kind of trying to make change from that. And I still believe that it is really important that protest culture, as well as, you know, direct action against institutionalized sectors in society is very important. But at the same time, especially in Japan, where protest culture, because of our history with student protests being very, very violent in the 80s and 90s, our society has a very negative view of protests, way more than the Western world. So as a lot of youth activists in Japan do, a lot of our work is grounded in actually working with and trying to find solutions directly with these institutions that make these rules and structures. So I work with a lot of corporations as well as local and regional governments. And I think that it's very important for panel discussions so that you can like walk away with like actual, I think, specific examples of what you can do in your respective institutions. I've worked with especially Euglena, which is a biotech company in Japan, which is really cool. We use microorganisms in order to create biofuel, as well as use them to make like makeup products and help kind of like super foods. So we kind of use that in order to fund our like ventures in creating and creating biofuel for jets in Japan. So that's kind of what we've been doing, and they did a really good job of incorporating youth voice into their corporate practices. I don't know if this word is like thrown around at all, but there's this word called that I like to use called youth washing, which is kind of like similar to like greenwashing, which is kind of like using youth as a kind of solution to everything, which is kind of like bringing them in and saying, okay, so you've said this, now you've done your part, kind of like what Vic said about like, you know, patting ahead, like taking a photo, posting it on social media, and that's kind of it. And I do believe that it's very hard to go beyond that point, and I understand like the corporation's view on that, because changing is uncomfortable, and changing and actually incorporating voices that might go against directly go against how historically things are done in the corporate world is, I think, even more confusing and uncomfortable for organizations that have been around for a long time. But for example, for Euglena, they created a position in the board, a paid position for students, a student under the age of 18 who they select every year, who evaluates company policy, actually investigates within the company, creates a report, and then with a team of other youth under the age of 18, actually create policy that is still underway for a lot, still underway after, I think 2 years after I left the position as well. So for example, our first CFO, who is already in her 20s already, proposed that we get rid of all plastic products or plastic wrappings for our products in Uglana, which they've completed this year. For me, I worked more on HR policy because in Japan, there's a lot of things related to age hierarchy, which makes it harder for younger employees to speak up against like problems within the company. So we created mentorship programs as well as opportunities for these youth to speak up, younger employees to speak up in a very age-oriented hierarchical institution. So there, for Uglana, because it was already a very liberal, open corporation, it was not that hard to speak up. However, I think it was really important, the fact that the board members, especially the CFO, CEO, really advocated for us and made sure to go above and beyond to ensure that our voices were heard, and make sure that it's not just like a hearing or something like a meeting between youth, but actually implementing these policies straight after these meetings are done, which takes a lot of manpower. It takes a lot of effort from the corporation side. They lost a lot of money because of this, but they really believed that it was important to implement this in the long run. As for local governments, what I've noticed is, and what I like to ground myself in, is to be mindful of the employees that are actually implementing these policies that we are proposing. I find that a lot of governments are actually pretty open to implementing youth policy and just because it looks good, as well as it's something that is very goal oriented for them, where they're trying to create a society that's, you know, better suited for the younger generation. So I think over the years it's become a little bit more open to actually implementing these policies. What I've had a problem with is the how the employees that are actually, or the governmental workers who actually implement these policies are treated. For example, in one of the city governments that I worked with, they were looking for a policy to try a policy proposal to try to implement more youth voices in a city that was called the dying city, which a lot of Japanese cities have a problem with this. A lot of youth leave rural areas and go to more, you know, modern metropolitan cities in order to get work. So they were losing a lot of youth population. Therefore, they wanted to implement more youth voices. So we proposed a really fun idea to like create a post box in the middle of the city where youth can kind of like write their ideas and put them in. It sounds fun. And it's the mayor immediately approved it. However, we realized that it's a lot of work for these employees who actually have to collect the letters and then kind of sort them in and then implement them actually in policy or create a proposal to implement these ideas. And we realized that that's not sustainable at all. I think sustainability is kind of created in or defined in different ways. I don't think sustainable ideas necessarily constitute sustainability. It's about the processes that are actually kind of used to implement them. So we realized that a lot of these employees were of the older generation. They would have to walk all the way to these like post boxes, actually collect them and then sort them and scan them and then put them in the databases, which would be a ton of work for them. So we consulted with them. We realized as a team that we weren't thinking about these people that actually are going to implement these things for us. So even though the mayor thought it was a great idea, we decided to reevaluate our kind of policy and change it into a QR code system that is kind of fun for youth as well. We scattered these QR codes around the city. So whenever youth had an idea or an opinion, they could kind of scan the QR code and then like type in their idea so that it would be easier for them to organize and put them into policy. They've actually used these opinions from the youth to influence their third climate law in this particular Japanese city. So I kind of went on a tangent, but what I think my activism is all about is these like small conversations that make sure that every stakeholder in the solution making process is heard, not just the youth, but actually the people that are going to implement these processes. And I wholeheartedly agree with Vic in that these processes, you kind of it makes you realize that it's all about listening and it's all about compassion. And it's all about making sure that you don't leave processes just for like solutions or a PR's sake. but actually making sure that you understand that it's going to take a lot of manpower and a lot of funding, a lot of people to get involved to create these sustainable processes and actually implement them. So listening is a really great first step, I believe. And I think that kind of has driven my activism from a place where I didn't feel heard as youth to actually getting a platform and then realizing that a lot of other voices weren't being heard in these policies and implementation as well. So that's kind of my take on it. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I cannot talk about the future and not talk about what happened in my life before that. So I personally grew up in a rural area, and seasonality punctuates our life. And as a moment, our parent first realized that the climate is changing, the crops or the harvest is not what they used to take in the past. And as children, we were concerned about the situation. And some of us, like me, go far on the subject and even choose biology at university. And I joined social movement as a guardian to do what we can do and what we are doing today. But in my journey as youth activist, personally, I finally choose to act on the field because in my community, we don't have to expect a lot from other people because it was in a rural area and the people have just to remain on themselves. But today, when we realize that the aspiration of young people is not take a lot into consideration, this because we all know that in some area of the globe, young people are the majority. But what has happened is that the young people are not majority at the decision taking places. So all the time is about the elders who have to take the decision. And we know that young people are more sensitive, to the crisis, whatever is it. They don't have any orientation. They are looking everything in the ideal form. So the young people are very sensitive to the crisis, but the elders are under the pressure of the reality or under the dictatorship of the emergency, which make the collaboration sometimes little difficult. Whatever we are condemned to work together. We are condemned to live together. As Rena said, we have a lot of green, youth. How can you give me the expression? Sorry, I forget. Okay.
No, you're doing beautifully in talking about the landscape and your history and bringing it to the present. So
maybe say it in French and someone can translate.
So we are facing youth washing in many cases nowadays. And personally, I have attended some, activities. I take part to many forum, many meeting where I feel like a flower pot on the table. But what we need to understand all is that no one will be youth forever. And those who are elders today were young at some moment. For example, if we take the story of United States, those people who were manifesting in May 1968, maybe if they were 18 years at that time, most of them will be close to 19 today. At that time, they have some ideal. They are against the war in Vietnam. Today, we have young people fighting against the war in Gaza. So the story will be always repeat itself. But what we need is that to cooperate as much as possible. That's true. For some time or for some reason, we will not understand each other. But we need a permanent dialogue. We need a permanent dialogue to build the future. We need a permanent dialogue for the climate crisis. We need a permanent dialogue to create peace, to build a more peaceful planet. And this permanent dialogue is what will make people stronger than the interests of nation or than the interest from private sector, than the interest from some particular group. So what I call everyone, what we need to do for the future is to work together. Whatever our adversity or our opposition are, we can overcome everything through dialogue. We need intergeneration dialogue to build a better future. Thank you.
No, thank you. Just a second.
And can I add something to that? Is that okay?
Sure.
Yeah, thanks. I always Mensa puts it so beautifully. But I think that like one point I want to bring up is like, when did like adulting or like growing up become synonym for like not moving or budging, not budging, or not, trying new things. And I think that a lot of youth actually feel fear of growing up, especially because we have, like the Forbes 30 under 30, where it's like for example, like the younger you are and like the more accomplished you are at a young age, you're more valued in society. And I feel like that's the most unsustainable thing I've ever heard. So I think that I think adults kind of underestimate, or older generations underestimate, the power of challenges taken at an older age and how much the younger generation is actually looking at these challenges and looking at older generations actually trying to fix things. Because I feel like a lot of the conversation around like activism right now is how inspiring the youth are, or how cool the youth are, or how different the younger generation or the Generation Z or Generation Alpha is. But I think we kind of forget that we're all part of the present and we're all, citizens of the present. So I think that a lot of adults kind of underestimate the power that they have to change and to grow and to, talk with us and talk and create solutions together. Because I've just found that a lot of youth just really want to be heard and really want to talk and really want to have genuine responses from adults. I feel like just silencing different generations for the sake of sustainability, whether it be the younger generation or whether it be the older generation, or, apologizing for the mistakes that came before, is very honorable. But at the same time, I feel like that implies that nothing can be done in the present, and that just makes me feel sad. So I think that, just like as Mensa said, like very beautifully, I think we all have to remember that, or we have to remember to not put ourselves in boxes of what society or what history has deemed our role in society is, whether we be 18 or whether we be 65. Like, we all have the same, more or less, kind of obligations in society to become better and to change for the better. And I feel like we just have to kind of not entirely get rid of, but just remember and acknowledge that there are these kind of subjective boxes that we put ourselves in that might be restricting the solutions that we come up with. So yeah, that was my take on intergenerational dialogue.
Yeah, I would love to just add to that because I really appreciate this conversation around intergenerational dialogue and communication, right? My vision for a very near future, like when we talk about the future, I really speak of tomorrow, in the next hour, in the next 2 hours, right? As we walk away from this conversation, that when we have events and we're in spaces where there is dialogue happening and conversations happening, it would be so refreshing not to be approached after and be told, I'm so glad that the fate of the entire world is on your shoulders, and I'm glad that you and your generation are going to be the ones to solve the climate crisis, because it just simply isn't true. Like Rena was saying, it's very unsustainable to put all of that pressure and responsibility on just a single generation, right? Like it really truly will take every single one of us in order to create tangible and lasting change. And so the vision that I have for the future is seeing this intergenerational collaborative work not as radical, right? Because it is right now, it is quite radical to have, that's one of the things that makes Earth Guardian so unique, is the fact that we work with the communities in the sense of empowering them to be their own leaders. I think it is quite unfortunate that that is a radical approach to creating change, but it is creating lasting, tangible, impactful, meaningful change. And I would love to see a future where that isn't radical, but it's simple. It's simple to look at the people who are most affected and give them the resources and the capacity and the skills to be able to create the future that they want to see. I also noticed in the chat that Betsy Fader, I apologize if I get your last name wrong, but Betsy asked a really great question, that as we think about our work as climate activists and climate leaders, what skills and resources do we need to sustain our work? I absolutely love this question, because oftentimes I find where there is a big disconnect between intergenerational collaboration is access to resources, right? While we often are the voices, youth are the voices amplifying the mission, amplifying the movement, a lot of times we're not the ones that have funding or necessarily the capacity to build the realities that we want to create. And so one of the biggest things for resources is funding. Funding is always needed and necessary. The second resource, like capacity, like I said, having everybody on board to help us, building more strength in the movement through having just everyone's voices being heard. And then when it comes to skills, I really believe critical thinking, agency, those skills that allow us to be able to lead ourselves are skills that sustain us, as well as setting boundaries, because this work can be very exhausting. Very exhausting for all of us. And I know oftentimes the older generation, that's what often happens is you spent a lot of time paving the way for us, and it can feel exhausting to continue to do this work. But setting boundaries as well as working together, so that way the responsibility isn't just on one person and we're all sharing the load together, I believe is the things that will keep us all sustained in this movement and being able to create change, so that way hopefully the next generation isn't fighting the same injustices that we fought. Hopefully there's actually solutions created.
Well, thank you. That was beautiful and very useful.
Joan, may I ask a question?
Yeah. Okay, let me just ask Tamsin a question first. Tamsin, is there going to be a written, is the recording also going to be in written form? There are a lot of gems in the conversation, or do we have the recording in the future?
We have the recording, but we will also do a synthesis. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Excuse me.
Yeah, thank you. So youth have changed the world, but becoming an adult is a screen. And those of us who are older and still active are those who pass through the screen of survival and raising a family, are people who still care about the things that you care about, and also have gained a lot of life experience. But I find that when I'm at meetings, there are very few young people. And I know it's something about what our relationships are with youth. It's very spontaneous for people to tribalize, and youth like to hang out with youth, and adults like to hang out with adults, et cetera, et cetera. If I see people with gray hair, I'm going to be more interested in talking to them, and that's very problematic. But I wonder if you could help us understand how to bridge that gap, communication gap. One problem that I see is that, yes, older people are people of experience, but maybe our sense of what's important gets sometimes stuck in past issues and maybe isn't forward looking enough, but that might just be one problem. But otherwise, if you could help us understand how to bridge youth and older people who are willing to share as mentors or as organizers or as simply support.
I think I can kind of start off that conversation. Thank you, Stephen. I think that when you think about how to include youth in these conversations, I think I want you to think about like your younger relatives, or your like daughters or your sons or your children or your nephews or your like anyone around you that's younger than you, and kind of like start the conversation from there. And like because it might be a problem on your side, but at the same time it might be a problem on younger generations as well. Like I like wholeheartedly understand that there is a stigma for younger activists where a lot of people kind of put us or kind of perceive us for very well understandable reasons as like a little bit scary to approach or a little bit like terrifying to approach. But the honest answer is that we're scared too. We're like, it's terrifying to go into a room that with people that look like they have it all together, that have a lot of life experience, that know things that we don't know. And actually walking in there and like kind of saying your piece, even though you know that you don't have the whole picture. And it's terrifying. Like, I feel like a lot of like activists don't really talk about this, where it's like, it's actually genuinely terrifying to like walk into a room of people that have these like different experiences than you, that you know that grew up in a very different environment and very different generation in society than you're growing up, and actually telling them that you know like the things that you're doing are wrong and things that you're like, and we want to kind of like contest that. It's very scary. And I think that we youth have to work on communicating that to you guys as well. And I feel like but I do believe that this fear is one of the like largest barriers to youth actually going to these meetings and entering these conversations, is that we are kind of put in a place where we're terrified, scared, and then that like fear kind of turns into kind of numbness, where like it's like, oh, we're not going to change anything. We have a lot of pressure put in ourselves if we kind of enter this work, therefore it's better to disconnect. And that was where I was when I was like 13, where I just realized that, you know, like it's really terrifying. It takes a lot of like mental capacity, emotional capacity to be plugged into these kinds of things. You're constantly being like, oh, I think it's the truth for any generation who's growing up in any society at any age. But like it's scary to kind of be plugged in and kind of have to witness the darker parts of activism work. That's why I feel like we kind of have to, you know, force positivity at all times so that we can kind of get through that. So I think that kind of acknowledging that fear, branching out, kind of like reminding yourself, when like I was 13, I was terrified as well, but I'm sure that when you guys were all 13 or 12 or like 18 or 25, you also had your concerns about how the older generation was handling your society and how you're going to grow up too. So I think that kind of like, it's hard to kind of go back there. And like, even me, like when I'm talking to like middle schoolers, I'm like, oh no, like I've kind of forgotten how to talk to middle schoolers and how to like kind of remember that like it's scary for like a middle schooler to talk to a college student. Therefore, it might be more scary for a college student to kind of walk into a room full of like business execs or funders or things like that. So I think that kind of like making sure that the youth also understand that like their fears are heard and kind of making it a more open conversation actually makes it better, I think, from my experience from kind of advising HR policy as a young person. Like making sure that the environment is better for younger people and for external people to come in and actually talk makes it better for like internal communication as well, because like the internal like employees that are already in the
Whoops. Yeah.
who are already in the organization to speak up as well. So like I think it starts internally, kind of making sure that the people in your company, like adults, actually feel safe enough to talk and give innovative ideas is like a great first step for like external people to actually come in, and especially young external people to come in and talk, and making that avenue available. So yeah.
Can I just ask a question there? Is there an element of sharing fears?
I think that vulnerability definitely is, which is scary to do for any person. But I remember when I started to work at Uglena, the CEO, who is relatively young, by the way, for a CEO in Japan, he's in his 40s, told us that we're here to make mistakes, and that he was also making mistakes every day. And like he told us about his experiences as a young CEO, also as like all of the people that we've worked with who kind of supported us through these like policy proposal stages within the company. We're always telling us that, like we don't know what we're doing as well, like we're kind of figuring out as like we go. And I think that that's just like a culture of like even before intergenerational kind of like a dialogue, just like a workplace thing where you're like kind of like expected to, like be put together, like kind of even in like college, like everyone's just like showing off their LinkedIns and being like, I did this cool thing, when like everyone's just like working it out. We're all, scared, and we all make mistakes all the time. So I feel like I think those like making sure that there's a culture of sharing vulnerabilities. We try to make an award for like mistakes every day, but that was a little bit too far. I agree, but like, we were trying to like make sure that like the workplace environment was more friendly, as well as making sure that these vulnerabilities and weaknesses were shared, so that younger and especially more inexperienced employees were being heard, was a key point in our HR policy proposal. Yeah.
So Vic, you look like you had something to add to this.
Oh, yeah. I was just gonna say that I think a lot of it has to do with meeting young people where they're at also. Young folks have met the world where it's at. And so I think we like deserve a little bit of leniency in terms of making sure that you understand where we're at and what we're approaching. Doing the work that I have since I was young, I've had to be in a lot of rooms of adults trying to convince them why an issue that they should already have cared about is important in the first place. And I think that's something that has to be considered and has to be acknowledged. And also at the same time, I always say, like, I think my fellow panelists have heard me say this exact example. I've been a youth activist for a while. Like I said, I've gone to a lot of COPs, like the Conference of Parties, the UN Climate Conference, spoken at the UN, been in a lot of spaces since I was very young. And also, that wouldn't have ever happened if I didn't get, pizza and a Metro card and a beanbag at an after-school program. You have to create like space that young people actually want to be in. And I don't think that that's too much to ask for in a world that like we came into being unsustainable for us. I think there has to be space created for young people in recognition of the fact that like we've been bought into a space that's not sustainable for young people. So I think there has to be kind of a give and take of like, you know, there's always a lot of commentary that young people aren't particularly engaged, but there's reasons for that. That's not just because we're apathetic or lazy. If anything, we're the most aware of the fact that the world is not particularly habitable for us. So really meeting us where we're at. Right now I'm on a commission for the Aspen Institute on climate media. And a lot of what we talk about is like, how do we create media? How do we create stories that really bring young folks into the fold of like, what is going on? What is their reality? What is their life? I think that's a big part of it. Meeting people. Yeah, exactly. I love that. For every young person who doesn't care, there are 10 adults who don't care. So I think almost it's one of those narratives that's not absolutely accurate, that young people don't want to be engaged or don't show up. It's just that like the effort isn't being put into bringing them into the conversation, or the effort that is put in isn't always necessarily the effort that's needed to bring young people into the conversation, or isn't considerate of what young people actually want to see or what they need.
Or might just be naive,
Yeah, absolutely.
I could say. Yeah. No, thank you. That's very, very helpful. Now, excuse me on my pronunciation here, but it's Sohelia. So Sohelia, are you with us still? And do you want to ask your question? I see your dark screen. Well, I'll read the question then.
I am, but I'm afraid I was actually just saying that I have to drop off.
Oh,
But I was just thanking you all because it's been really valuable, I think, to be in that kind of space where older generations and young activists are speaking to each other, and I think we need more of that. So I really appreciated your wisdom and your openness. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for joining us, and thank you. Okay, we have about 20 minutes, and there are a lot of good questions and issues, you know, in the chat. And maybe I will ask two things. One, for the panelists, if you're looking at those questions, are there any you'd really like to jump on and respond to? And also, if there's someone in the group who has a question or a response to an observation that you would like to make.
I would.
There was an I would. I can't tell
Joan,
who.
can I say something?
Sure, Michael.
Yeah, I'm so impressed by this whole presentation, and it seems to me that the whole strategy of Earth Guardians is a very sophisticated, empowering. Well, it's a very skillful strategy. I'm curious whether you came to that strategy all at once, or whether the strategy evolved, and whether there were debates about how to do it, or whether this was sort of part of the DNA from the start. So that's my question.
I feel like Kelly could probably do a really good job answering that question.
Yeah, thanks, Vic. And thank you, Michael. I was actually going to speak to something similar, a little bit tangent. Yes, this was part of the DNA from the start. It's always been an intergenerational organization, but that puts youth at the forefront with the wisdom of the elders and the experience of the elders helping to guide the youth. So elders, and they call me a seasoned youth. That's what we get called now, as seasoned youth. We're not disposable. We're very, very valuable. And what I love about this organization is that it is much like traditional societies, where we're actually passing our wisdom down to the young people who have more energy than we do at this point, so they can go and do the work, and integrating their ideas, utilizing the wisdom of the elders. So by no means is this just a youth organization. It's very much an intergenerational organization, and it has been from the get-go. And I will say there has been some processes, in terms of, at one point our entire staff was middle-aged white women, and we've done a valiant amount of work to diversify our staff, to make our staff global, and to make our staff primarily young people under 30. Mensa and I are the only two people over 30 now on the staff, although we have other adult mentors throughout our partnerships, that continue to help guide with many years of expertise in the climate and environmental movements. So I hope that answers your question. Yes, and there has been a lot of growth to diversify and to continue to put young people in leadership positions with the support of seasoned youth, or elders, or olders, however you want to call us. And I see Vic's got his finger up too.
Okay, I think that Mensa wanted to say something.
Okay, yes, I want to react to the question of Stephen. Kelly has almost answered it, but I can add some few things. I don't think that the elders have to run after young people to assist them. First of all, the elders have some experience and wisdom that young people don't have. The beautifulness of young people, the intelligence, or I don't know, the energy and the engagement we have, that cannot replace the wisdom, the experience of the elders. So it's up to young people to collaborate with elders as mentor. For example, I was talking about the event of 1968, which is happening today. So if we have an elder who lived that moment, this person is like a living book who can give guidance, talk to us through history, how to manage the situation. The energy and engagement of young people sometimes don't allow them to manage correctly some crises. So elders are all we need. We are not come to replace them. They are not our opponent, but we are here to collaborate hand in hand to achieve the common goal. Thank you.
No, thank you.
And I think the narrative that young people are trying to like push off elders or ignore them is probably more of a projection of some sort of insecurity about the fact that like that we're so different. Like, you know, I could talk all about being young and talk all about how important young people are. That doesn't change the fact that I look to an elder when I need to do my taxes, just like I look to an elder about changing the world. Like there's definitely no beef between like young people and elders. I think that maybe there is constantly this sort of perception that when you start talking about being young and wanting to make a difference, that you're somehow like trying to throw off elders, but that's definitely not the fact. I think it's just something that like that people, yeah, I think it's a projection of a narrative that actually isn't that fully accurate. Like if anything, young people are constantly dependent on their elders. And that's just the fact of the matter. And when we talk about being young and wanting to make a difference, it's not saying that like you can you can't be an elder and make a difference. If anything, we need you guys more than ever. Kind of that example that I think Emmy brought up earlier. It's like, I've spent a lot of time in this work since I was 14. I've walked out of an event and had an older person telling me the reason I was going to save the world. And like, really what we're asking for is not for you to guess us or to tell us that we're going to save the world. It's for you to help do it at the same time. And I don't think that's really anything that a young person is in denial about at the end of the day.
No, thank you.
Ntlantla has a
Tamsin, are
question.
you?
Sorry, I see Ntlantla had a question. Can I hand over to you?
Hi, thank you, Tamsin. Well, it's more really just an addition to the conversation about intergenerational conversations. Coming from Africa, I think I would say that it's not so much that adults and young people can't work together, as it is the how it is done that becomes a problem. This obviously from an African context, because that's all I know. So when young people speak at adults, they will be rejected outright. And when older people speak at young people turn to push them back, right? So what you find is that understanding where older people grew up, I think for us, Mensa, maybe you might agree, we are more in the middle, between the younger and the older people. So we kind of see things differently. But when you understand how older people grew up and how younger people are growing up, you then have a sense and an understanding that if I'm going to speak to an older person and try to bring them onto this fight that we're on, there's a way to do it. As young people will want to bring biology and science and all our intelligence in all its glory, and an older person will want to bring the experience and the indigenous knowledge in all its glory. And then we reject each other, but really we're all speaking the same thing. It's just that we are not hearing one another. And I think where we can bring older people and younger people together in fighting this, I think it's just how it is done. Well, at least in Africa. I'm not sure for the rest of the world, but yeah, that was just a comment, Tamsin, not, yeah.
No, it's very helpful.
Yeah,
Very helpful.
I really appreciate that comment as well, because I see in the chat a lot of people are asking how do we connect? And I noticed Jim asked directly, is the best way to connect with youth organizations? Is that the only way or the best way? I do personally believe it would be the best way to connect with youth organizations, staying away from the stranger danger narrative, as well as just having youth that are already mobilized and available. But of course, it's not the only way, right? As we've all talked about, as what I really was hearing from our panel and what I've been really feeling personally in the last couple of months is that the fear of getting old, this shared fear of growing old, has created sort of a generation that doesn't really see themselves as mentors, doesn't see themselves as the elders that we're speaking of right now, right? And what we are all in need of is those elders, is those mentors. We've mentioned it multiple times here, is that youth are just as much as what Mensa said, is it's our responsibility of youth to step up and seek mentorship. It's also just as much so as a responsibility to make an intention to be a mentor, to be intentional about it. That was what I was going to say about bridging the gap between youth and elders.
Oops.
You have frozen again, Em.
Well, I think she got most of the way through that. Vic, did you want to add?
Can you hear me? Can you guys?
Em, are you
Great.
back?
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Great. Yes, I was just saying, like what Vic was saying is creating a space. The how to do it is making sure that you're creating a space that is welcoming to youth. Like Vic said, having pizza available for after school, because who knows what kind of circumstances these youth are in, trying to mobilize themselves. And we all have to remember what it was like being a high schooler, right? And being another really good intention is what Rena was speaking of, creating vulnerability, having a space where we have empathy and tolerance for one another, and we're leading with an open mind, and then finding connections between one another, because like Mensa and everybody has said, we all remember what it's like to be young. We all have been young at one point, and so just remembering not only what you felt like when you were a youth trying to pave the way for the next generation, but also just remembering that we have common connections, that there are similarities between us in spaces. And when we share these spaces with one another, the more we create that intention, the more it becomes normalized, and the more that how to bridge that gap becomes easier. The more those conversations become easier because they become normalized when we create the intent to bridge the gap and make sure we're meeting at each other's needs and creating spaces where we're vulnerable and tolerant and have empathy for one another. And yeah, I'll pass the mic off to Vic, who I see has his hand up.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I feel like Joan, you tried to contextualize this at the beginning of the conversation about like youth versus adult. And, like the only gaps that exist anywhere are the ones that we decide to let live and the ones that we create. And so whether we're talking about youth versus elders, or whether we're talking about even Black versus white, or we're talking about frontline communities versus communities that aren't on the front lines, the point of the matter is, at the end of the day, is that like we all have things that we want to protect, and we all have things that we love, and we should all do our best at holding on to that for each other. So yeah, I think that when we talk about or even the fact that we have to say intergenerational, even the fact that we even have to talk about intersectionality is interesting, because it should be quite obvious, the fact that we all live on this planet and we all deserve to have the best quality of life. And no matter what boxes we create between one another, or what gaps that we create between one another, we could just not create those gaps. We could just decide not to do that. So, yeah.
No, thank you. So I'm going to ask Boss, has a hand up? Is that correct? And then ask each of the panelists just for 1 minute of summary comments, and we'll end kind of on time. Go ahead, Boss.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much. That was such a pleasure to hearing you all. And yeah, just it feels so much that you all that you already have everything it takes. And yeah, I can only say thank you so much for this inspirational talk. And yeah, you really make me curious how I can support you. Thank you.
Well, thank you for being with us. Okay, who of our panelists would like to begin our 1 minute round?
I'm not really a panelist, but I just want to say thank you all for being here. Please go to our website, check out all of our different programs. You can even sign up to start a crew yourself, and then we can help you get connected to young people in your communities via our resources. I hope you guys feel the amazing inspiration from these young people, and feel a desire to continue to support young people in your communities, and maybe even support our work through partnerships, through funding, through more speaking opportunities, through frontline direct action opportunities in your communities. So thank you all for having us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Kelly. Okay, let's go back to our panel because we're losing people. Just what would you like to say?
Yeah, I'll just echo off of Kelly. Like, thank you, boss, for the sentiment and for your kind words. I really, really do appreciate it. But the truth is, we don't have everything we need because we need all of you. We need everybody's voices, and we need your support as much as capacity that you're able to provide to the movement. So yeah, as Kelly said, please check out our website. Feel free to start a crew yourself too when you're bruising our website. We know that our crews are usually marketed as youth-led, but we're really trying to continue to bridge this intergenerational work. So if you are interested in partnering with us, starting a crew, or donating, please check out our website.
Thank you.
I can go next. I just want to say thank you so much for everyone who came to listen. I think the fact that you're in this room right now and was willing to listen for like an hour as we kind of spoke about this certain topic just speaks volumes about your capacity to listen. So I think the only thing I would like to say is like conversation, like obviously listening isn't also important, but just making sure that you're like everyone is having fun like while doing this, because I think that sustainability only comes when you're passionate or when you're having fun in your work and actually finding joy in what you do. It's a very person heavy, manpower heavy solution making process. So I think just making sure that you're like having fun with it as well. Obviously, we have a lot of societal obligations, pressures that kind of like forces us to like kind of view it as work, but we are creating a new society, and we are creating a society that's better for our generation, the generations that come after. So I think I just want to leave you with, when you walk out of, or like when you like click out of the Zoom room, to like kind of just make sure that and check with yourself that like the work that you're doing, you're actually having fun with. And like, I feel like that funness and that like, you know, that joy that you're experiencing from your work is going to radiate when you are trying to bring new people or new stakeholders into your kind of conversation. So I think that just making sure that listening is obviously super, super important, but making sure that the one speaking or you yourself in the conversation is actually feeling joy in the work that you're doing is what I want to leave everyone with. Because, you know, like, I don't think youth should be the only ones, you know, required to have fun or like to experience it.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll tap in real quick. I'll try to be concise. Loved this conversation. Dialogue is everything, you know, conversations are everything. Talk more, be more, do more, and especially love more.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you all. Thank you, Tamzi and John, for making this happen. And thank to all the participants. Joining this call is a proof of your engagement to go to meet young people and start a dialogue with them. So I hope that we have planted some seed on intergenerational dialogue, so we can continue on this way to strengthen the relationship between the elders and young people. I'm very happy to see all of you here, and feel free to visit our page at Guardian social media and our at Guardian official web. Feel free at home, start a crew if you can. We are always available. Feel free to contact us for anything. Thank you very much.
No, thank you. And also want to thank Em for her last comment here, which is also a nice one for closing. And as we leave the room together with some, I at least have some words bouncing around my head and that I think will stay for much longer than the day. of love and empathy, collaboration, small conversations, intergenerational, and joy. And so with that, I will hand it to you, Tamsin.
Thank you, Joan. Well, I have to say, Vic, Mensa, Rena, and Emmy, you have made me the most hopeful all year, because we've been talking about this conversation. We've met about it before. I think everybody who is here have probably read, or hopefully have read, a little bit about what each of them are doing in their communities. But I just am so struck and inspired and grateful for everything you've done and brought to this conversation. And so thank you. And thanks everyone for joining. And thank you, Joan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joan. Thank you, Tamsin.
Thank you, Joan.
Thanks,
you.
everyone. Thanks, Joan. Well done.
Thanks, Tom. See you all next week.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.